state of New Jersey kept a file on a woman named Joanne Chesimard, and the woman in that file wrote a book under a name she chose herself. Later in the book, in the chapter where she renames herself, she tells you why. She took the name Assata Shakur, and she says the word Assata was meant to carry one idea. In her words, quote, "she who struggles," end quote. She set it in place of Chesimard, a name she traced in her account to the slaveholder who had once owned her ex-husband's ancestors. Now, the automatic way to read this is quick, and it feels like common sense. The file is the real record. The memoir is the spin. But this part of the book asks you to slow down and notice something plainer. They're both documents, and each one had an author. Here's the ground we don't leave, all the way through. A New Jersey state trooper, Werner Foerster, was killed on the turnpike in 1973. A jury convicted her of that murder in 1977, and in her own account, she does not place herself anywhere but in the car when the shooting happened. She escaped in 1979, later received asylum in Cuba, and in 2013 became the first woman the FBI ever put on its most wanted terrorist list. She died in Cuba in 2025. And underneath all of that, this final part keeps asking a quieter question about any person a government has prosecuted and then hunted. Who wrote the record you're reading? We're going to follow the book to 4 places where that question comes due: the prison, the birth, the escape, and the name. Start before the 1977 conviction, in the year she was held in custody and tried, but not yet convicted of the killing. Here's what the book insists you notice about that stretch. While the case was still unsettled, the jailers already had her body. She describes being taken to a hospital under guard, early in a pregnancy. And here's the detail she puts on the page. She writes that she was, quote, "shackled to the bed by my foot," end quote. She recounts that the doctor, who had established she was a month pregnant, demanded when he visited that the shackles be taken off. That happened while the case against her was still unsettled. Sit with that picture for a second, because it's doing the argument's work. This isn't the drama of a courtroom. It's a shackle, a hospital bed, and a doctor demanding they take the restraint off a pregnant woman who, at that point, had not been convicted of the killing. Now, you could push back here, and you should. A prison memoir can describe hard conditions without proving the case behind the bars was wrong. That's fair. But watch what the detail is actually claiming. It isn't claiming innocence. It's claiming something narrower and harder to wave off, that the physical hold on her came before the 1977 Turnpike verdict. She describes months in solitary, held at times as the only woman inside a jail for men. That's a kind of power that doesn't wait for a jury. It's control of the room, the cuffs, the cell. And before guilt is ever settled in law, there's a prior question. Who holds the body? And holding it completely is not the same as having settled the truth. If the first movement is the reach of that power, the second is its limit. And the book finds that limit in the most guarded moment it's got. Her daughter was born in 1974, and she describes the room as one under heavy police watch. Police women right inside the labor room. The hospital ringed by officers. And then she names the child and marks the moment in one breath that just refuses everything around it. She writes that the birth was, quote, "peaceful and beautiful," end quote. Don't rush past how strange that is on the page. Nearly every fact she reports about that scene is control. The officers she describes in the room, the building she says was surrounded, and the 2 words she keeps for herself are peaceful and beautiful. That's the sharpest image in this whole part. The gap between what a government can command and what it can't touch. It can command the room. It can't author the meaning the person makes inside it. Now here's the strongest objection, and the book half invites it. A memoir naturally frames its author's most vulnerable hour as a small victory. And the peaceful reading is hers, written years later, after she had reached Cuba. Grant all of it. She's the only one who could report the interior of that moment, and a report from the person with the most to gain is not beyond doubt. But notice what that concession does not touch. Even a full official log of every guard in that hallway could not record 1 inch of what she carried out of the room. The state writes the conditions. It doesn't write the interior. The third place is where 2 accounts of the very same act get laid down side by side and never reconciled. In 1979, she escaped from prison, and the book won't hand you the escape as a scene. It's barely there. She mentions only the edges of it, that she called her grandparents, in her words, a day or 2 before I escaped. And then she's simply gone from the page. Where she surfaces is a phone call, and the phrase she uses there is the hinge of the whole arc. Assata Shakur wrote, quote, "I'm a political refugee here," end quote. She was calling from Cuba, which later granted her political asylum around 1984. Now hold the 2 words for what she'd done right next to each other, because the record and the author each keep 1. To the state, it was an escape after a murder conviction. To her, it was political refuge. And here is where a careful listener should get uneasy, because this is the move most open to abuse. Recasting a conviction and an escape as refuge is exactly the work a memoir is built to do. And a reader who wants her guilty will hear a convicted woman renaming her own getaway. That objection is not cheap, and I'm not going to answer it by pretending the conviction away. So we keep the line out in the open. A trooper was killed. A jury convicted her. She does not put herself outside the car. And from Cuba, she called herself a refugee, not a fugitive. The episode doesn't resolve that for you, and it shouldn't, because the resolution is the very thing in dispute. Notice what's quietly happened to our question, though. It's not only about what happened on the turnpike anymore. It's about who gets to name what happened after. Which brings us to the book's deepest move, and it isn't a fact at all. It's a form. The autobiography itself is the argument. To see it, go back to the 2 names we opened with. On one side is the state's record, and it's worth being exact about what that is, because it isn't one clean thing. It's the government's record on Joanne Chesimard, the New Jersey case that convicted her, the prison, the wanted notices, and then, decades later, a separate federal chapter. In 2013, the FBI added her to its most wanted terrorist list, the first woman it ever added, and a combined reward reached $2 million, $1 million from the FBI and $1 million from the New Jersey Attorney General. That record was written by a lot of hands over a lot of years. On the other side is this book, written by one person in her own voice, and the name she took for herself is Assata Shakur, she who struggles. She says she shed Chesimard, her ex-husband's family name, which she traced to, in her words, the slave master of my ex-husband's ancestors. Read the move slowly. To take a chosen name in place of one that came down from a slaveholder and then write your life under it is to answer the file with a book. You can read it as a counter document, a book written to answer the file. And I think that is the closest read to why it exists. And the opening poem gives you the key, and the line that holds it is almost stubbornly plain. Assata Shakur wrote, quote, "A wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down," end quote. I read that wall first as the prison wall, and then as the other walls too. The file, the name, the record the state had already written for her. I keep coming back to how plain that move actually is. The book's argument is its form. In her telling, the label Fugitive gives way to Refugee. Chesimard gives way to Assata, and the file is answered by a memoir. Every one of those is the same insistence, made 3 times over, that the power to write the record is the power in dispute. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it cuts both ways, which is what makes it honest. The same freedom she uses to reclaim her name is the freedom to shape a story. And a shaped story is not the same thing as a proven one. So, the book's answer to who gets to say who you are is that she does, by writing it. And that answer is strongest exactly where it's most suspect, because a memoir has every incentive to shape its author's case. And it is also, sometimes, the only place the interior of a life ever gets written down at all. Now let me be fair in the other direction, because the book won't do it for you. The reader who has read only this memoir has also heard exactly one firsthand account, and it is hers, the defendant's. There was a trial. A jury heard the case and convicted her. And the hardest reading of her book is that a convicted woman is authoring her own innocence. You should be able to sit with that without flinching. So doubt runs both ways. The government's records earn it for the power and the mistakes of institutions. The memoir earns it for self-interest and for the way memory softens things over the years. You don't have to swallow it whole or throw it out whole. You can honor the name a person took for herself and her humanity and still leave open what the conviction settled in law and her account never stopped contesting. That is the whole ask, smaller than acquittal and harder than agreement. A record always has an author, on both sides. Refuse to let the last word on a person be written by only one of them.